Allora, siamo qui a Monte Carlo, questa volta con un ospite davvero speciale, Mira Sorvino. How are you, Mira? It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Are you in jet lag a little bit?
Yes. This is my second cup of espresso in here.
Yeah, this is a very Italian thing, so
Yes.
don't worry.
Okay.
So you're here in Monte Carlo to receive a career award. Looking back at the very beginning, did you expect all of this? And it's true that your father, Paul, didn't want you to...
He did not want any of us kids to be actors. He didn't want us to have a life of rejection. He felt that as an actor, you're always only as good as your last 3 projects, or even less than that, and it was up and down like a roller coaster, and that when you are an actor and you get rejected in an audition or casting or something, in other professions, it's not as personal. It's your work. It's your resume. But in acting, they're literally rejecting you. You're not
your persona.
this enough, you're not that enough, it's you. And he thought that that would be damaging for us, and he really wanted us to have more of like a life of stability and like hitting a plateau professionally and getting to stay on that for a while. Like a professor, a doctor, or whatever. But once I was 23 and I was taking a course in New York, because I had done a lot of acting, but I tried to explore other options, largely because of him saying that, but also because I wanted to get my education. But I graduated from college, from Harvard, and then I went back to New York after working as a producer on a documentary, and having lived in China. But then the Tiananmen Square happened, so I couldn't really go back to China to keep doing my academic stuff over there. And actually in China I was singing too. I was a jazz singer in China. I have a crazy life. And I came back to New York, and as part of what I was doing, I took a course at the International Center for Photography called The Creative Process. It was right around the time of the, awakening your muse, and so every day you were supposed to shoot a roll of film, emulsion, not digital, and you had to process it yourself, and print it, and journal every day to try and ramp up your creativity, right? And as I was doing that, one day it really came to me. I was like, oh, my channel to say what I have inside me right now in my life, maybe not in the future, is to act.
Wow.
Like what I have inside me needs to come out through acting.
It was like an epiphany.
Yes, it was very strong, because I had always acted, but I had done other things. And at the time I was also working for De Niro's company and Jane Rosenthal, Tribeca Productions, as a scriptreader, because I was thinking I wanted to be a director.
Okay.
So at first I started as a volunteer, it was like an intern, and then they hired me to do it. It was a tough job, because it's very hard to boil a script's essence down to 3/4 of a page and then give a 2-paragraph review. And I was too soft on them. I always wanted to give them a chance, because I was like, oh, if they would only...
Maybe it could be a
I would give them notes, if they could just differentiate the characters' voices more, or if they could work on the 3rd act, then it would go from a B+ to an A-. And then Jane Rosenthal called me into her office one day, and she was like, Mira, how many scripts have you recommended this year? And I said, consider on 2 and recommend on 1. And I had read 200 scripts. And she was like, you're being too soft on them. And she said, you need to think about this, that in order for you to put even consider on a script, it has to be worth millions of dollars and 2 years of my time. And I was like, oh, okay. Wow, okay, I got it. Yeah, it was very interesting, though. It was a good lesson.
Wow.
But anyway, back to, in this class, and I was like, I'm meant to be an actor. I know right now in my life this is what I'm doing. Maybe later I'll be a director, I'll be a photographer, I'll be whatever, but right now I'm an actor. And I went to my dad and I told him, he was like, then you have my blessing. Then you have my blessing. If this is the only thing you want to do and there's nothing else you want to do as much, because he always said if you cared about 2 things equally to acting, do the other thing. Because you need to have that singular drive. You would not make it if you didn't have that singular drive, and it wouldn't be worth all the slings and arrows of it,
So you work with many great directors, Robert Redford, Spike Lee, of course, Woody Allen, Guillermo del Toro. Spike Lee's, the movie with Spike Lee is maybe one of my favorite.
I love it. Yeah, it's great.
If you have to pick one among them?
Oh, I can't pick one. There's so many great ones, so many. Even Nancy Savoca, who I got to work with. I did this great movie called Union Square that no one has seen. I highly recommend it. She and her husband produced it. They made it for, I think, less than $100,000. We made it in New York, in Netta Armian's apartment. It's a wonderful story. Patti LuPone is in it, about two sisters. They're Italian-American. One of them is trying to sort of pass as sort of crunchy granola white bread girl, and my character is very like crazy like a fox and, you know, maybe bipolar, but she has a secret and she has to share it. And it's a beautiful story about this relationship between the two sisters and the mother, and Patti LuPone's the mother. And it was so improvisational, and it's really powerful, and no one has seen it because that was one of the ones where we made it for nothing. Then they took it to Toronto, and at Toronto they got a distributor, and then that distribution company folded. And so then they decided, you know what, we're going to self-release it. And they said, you know, it can go viral. But it was just at the beginning of internet campaigns, and we didn't have that social media savvy. I mean, I didn't even have it. I think I got an Instagram account to help promote it. Like I had no idea, you know. And so very few people have seen it. But that year at the Oscar nominations, somebody, I think it was Variety, it was either Variety or Hollywood Reporter, said, you know, one's Oscar forgot, and then they said Mira Sorvino easily bests her performance in Mighty Aphrodite in this Nancy Savoca movie.
Wow.
So that's how good the movie is. I'm not saying that's how good I am, but like it's compared to that. So so I loved working with her. I loved working with Spike. I loved working with Robert Redford. I loved working with Antoine Fuqua, with Guillermo. Ryan Murphy directed me in Janet Mock was more the director when we were doing Hollywood, and a few other wonderful directors, but Ryan directed a couple of the most important episodes of Impeachment, and that was wonderful to work with him.
Many.
Yeah. Just.
So the last question, very short. Who's your favorite actress or actor? Your personal Jesus.
Oh, well, I mean, of the past,
Yeah.
I would have to say it was like a three-way tie in terms of the actresses between Marilyn Monroe, Sophia Loren, and Audrey Hepburn.
Wow.
They were my favorites, all, for different reasons. Very different people, very different screen persona,
Very
all
different women,
all legendary. And I had the great good fortune to actually work with Sophia Loren on a movie.
With Eduardo Ponti.
Yes, and that was a beautiful experience, and I really treasure it. I got to work with some legendary people in my time. I got to work with Marlon Brando, who was my favorite actor at the time, and that was a trip. It was not a good movie. It's not a good movie. It's called Free Money, and it's not a good movie, but it's interesting, and he gives a very interesting, weird, black comedic performance. It's almost like three different movies. So he thinks he's in this sort of independent, like black comedy, very experimental, weird movie. Charlie Sheen and Thomas Hayden Church are in like a dumb buddy comedy, and me and Donald Sutherland are in a drama.
Wow.
I don't know why. I don't know why we were so serious, but I got to work with the great Marlon Brando, and that was
Marlon Brando.
Yes, that was quite the experience, and quite amazing, both professionally and personally. And it had its ups and downs, but in the end, it was really a super excellent experience. I'd say, like right now, I mean, there are so many great performers out there. I do think that Russell Crowe is a very great actor, and I'd love to see him in more things again. There are just so many great people. I don't want to say one and leave out the other. You know, there's just I love watching my peers work. You know, and my betters. I mean, I always love it.
Thank you very much, Mira
Thank
Sorvino. Grazie mille.
Thank you.
Marlon Brando, I didn't know that.
Yes,
Which movie?
it's called Free Money.
Free Money.
Yeah, it's a weird little movie. It was one of his last movies. We shot it in Canada.
So it was like in the 90s?
Yeah, it was, I think I was about 30 when I shot it. I think I was going out with Quentin
how was
still.
the man?
So maybe he was fascinating and a game player. You know, my father always used to say he's a destroyer of women because he had read, the biographies about him and everything. And he plays games. Like, he first sort of sucked me in, and he told this story. So he was like, he came in and walked in, and he was like, I still have my little drinker. Are you still rolling?
Yeah, but
okay. No, this is a good story though.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So he comes in, and we'd been waiting 2 days for him to show up. He was on set, but not feeling well. So he walks into this courtroom scene, and me and Thomas and Charlie Sheen all jump up at attention because there's Marlon Brando walking in, and he's done this crazy thing with his hair where he's like shaved this sort of ring around his head, like he's, you know, bald, and he's done like a Jesus Saves jailhouse tattoo on the back. He plays like a prison warden, and he was actually padding himself, even though he was quite heavy, to be fatter looking. Yeah. Dyed his hair red. I mean, played this very crazy character. And he walks in, and we're like, Mr. Brando. And he's like, my, you're a tall drink of water, he says to me. And I was like, ah, ah. And then he comes and sits down with me and Charlie and Donald Sutherland. And he said, I used to, you know, acting can be a terrible profession. You have to put yourself in all these emotional contortions. You have to imagine that your dog died. It's a terrible profession. But then one day, I realized the audience didn't care how I got them there as long as I got them there. And he said, so I started writing my lines on different parts of the room, on pieces of paper. And, you know, I'd scratch my chin and I'd look at that, and that's behavior. It looks like behavior. And he starts talking about all these cheats. And then he said that one time he put his lines on a piece of paper and stuck it to this man's forehead in front of him, completely obscuring the man's face. I mean, it's super disrespectful, right? But, you know, and I was like, oh, you can't do that with me. I was just like, don't do that to me. And, you know, so he keeps, you know, talking, and he's just like, you know, so, yeah, and just all these different things about the way that he cheated and didn't have to feel those hard feelings anymore. And then he walked away, and Donald Sutherland said, wow, that's like God saying there's no heaven. Because everyone saw him as the great authentic genius of kitchen sink realism, of, you know, the sort of actor studio method acting. That's, you're supposed to be using your insides. And I always use my insides to this day. You know, there's that thing that my father used to say. He would say, stick with the other fellow and you will never be wrong. You might be boring, but you'll never be untrue. Like if I sit here and I just really listen to you and hang on to what you're doing, I lose any pre-planned notion of how I was going to do it, and it becomes real, right? It becomes organic, and things can happen, like surprising things can happen, and I love it when that lightning in a bottle happens. But I've had other famous people come up to me and been like, you know, but that's the thing, my dad instilled this in me, that it had to be real. Like, and he used to tell this story about the great Bernhardt, the great stage actress, who people came to see her after a show, and she was crying, and they said, oh, you were wonderful, what's wrong? You were so wonderful. And she said, tonight I broke a law within myself. That she wasn't real, she wasn't really coming, she was faking it. And so, and my father used to say, the day they use the tears, the glycerin tears, is the day I walk out of the business. And so I have never, ever used the artificial drops or the camphor, because people put camphor, they blow camphor in their eyes, and I'm like, no, I got to make myself cry. I've got to do it. He taught me how to cry when I was 8. When I was 8 years old, because I had a scene in a school play, and he had me go down to like the middle of the stairs, halfway up, halfway down. You know, there's a landing, and just think about something really sad until I came down in tears. And he's like, and now do the scene and practice that moment alone, and then make it like a birthday cake that's ready for you. When you hit it in the scene, you're automatically going to start crying at that point. You can't come in crying. You've got to cry at that moment, you know. So, like, I had a master actor as my dad, so I got all this, you know, l'arte di tate mezza imparata, he would always say, you know. You know, I had. That's true. You know, I had this great advantage, and you know, when they talk about nepo babies, I suppose in a way I'm a nepo baby, although I don't think my life has gone like a nepo baby's life you would think would go. It's different. But it's true. You can't deny the artistic help that. It's like the son of a plumber. Yeah, if your father or a doctor, or you learn a shoemaker. You know, it's an art. It's an art form that you learn from them. So absolutely. Thank you very much, Mira Sorvino. Grazie. Thank you. Grazie.